Welcome to all techies. I'm Pankaj Rai, and in today's video I'm going to talk about how can you create a login UI with Jetpack Compose. Well, if you are creating app for the public and you want your app features to get used by only those who are authenticated users, then login screen is something that you cannot avoid. But the best thing is that with the powerful feature of Jetpack Compose, you can easily create the good looking UI for your users. Well, this video is primarily focused for creating the login UI, and then in the subsequent video we'll also see how to integrate Firebase authentication to that. Well, as you can see on the right side of the panel, we are going to create a login screen which will have a bit of blur background, and then on top of that we'll have a box which is having a bit of different shape. So a cut corner shape on the top, and towards the right side again a cut corner shape, but it's a bit lengthier than the left side. Then our UI is divided into three segments. One is the label, which comes with welcome back, sign in to continue. Then towards the center we'll see about the email ID and password field, which also includes the forgot password option. And then at the bottom we'll provide sign in and an option where user can click to navigate to the sign up screen. Well, whatever I'm going to show right now for the login, same you can replicate for the sign up too. Okay, now let's get started to check out how can we create this kind of UI. Well, first and foremost thing is let's create a composable, and let me name this as login. Well, as you can see in the UI, the first thing is we need to set a background which occupies the entire width and height of the screen. So what should we do for that? So whenever we want to place element one over the other, box is the composable that we should certainly use at those places. So let's use box composable with fill max size as the modifier. This means that let this box to occupy the entire width and height of the parent. Well, for us, parent will be the screen because we are going to place it directly in the surface. Let me say this as login. Now the next thing is we need to place image. So we'll use image composable, which requires painter. So let's provide painter resource. We'll provide the image r.drawable.loginbg, and then let's also provide the content description. Content description is really helpful for the accessibility. So whenever the talkback feature of the accessibility is on, then it will read out this content description. So let me say this as login itself. Next thing that we have to do is this image should occupy the entire width and height of the screen. So for that we should use modifier, and we'll say this as occupy the entire width and height. Another thing that we have seen is that this image is blur, and to add blur images with Jetpack Compose, it is as simple as calling a blur modifier. So on this modifier, let's call blur modifier, which needs radius. So let me give this as 6 dp. Okay. Finally, because this image width and height may be different with the aspect ratio, so it may not occupy the entire width and height of the screen, because of the aspect ratio that it maintains. So what should we do is we should use content scale, and here I'll say content scale dot crop. What it means is that we want this image to occupy the entire width and height of the screen. So it doesn't matter what's the aspect ratio of this image, pull the image to occupy the entire size, and for that if it needs to crop certain part of the width or height of the screen, let it crop those part. Let's check out our UI. So for that, let me use preview, and here let's say show background as true, and then show system UI also as true. Well, here is the UI. So far what we have built, we made the image to occupy the entire size, and it's also blur, which we have specified with a blur modifier. Now on top of this, we wanted one box to appear which was having a cut corner shape, which was having the same cut size for the top left and bottom right, and similarly goes for the bottom left and top right. So for that, let's create a box once again. This time again, let this occupy the entire width and height, but now we'll put a padding which will act as a margin for us, because it will leave the sufficient space towards left, right, top and bottom. Let's say this as 16 dp, and then we will use clip modifier. So clip is a modifier through that we can change the shape of the composable. So what we needed was the cut corner shape, and in case if I write say 16 dp, then what it's going to do is that it's going to have the same cut shape towards left, right, top and bottom. But our case was different. We wanted a different shape for the left and right, for the top and the bottom side. So for that, what we can do is we can use top start, top end, bottom start and bottom end parameter. So for that, let's use top start as a cut shape of 8 dp, then top end, let this occupy around 16 dp cut shape. Similarly goes for the bottom start, again let it have 16 dp, and then bottom end, let it have 8 dp. We also need to set the background for this, so let's set a background now. You'll see this as material theme dot color scheme dot background, and that's it. So let's check out how our UI is looking like. Okay, so here it is. We have a very small cut shape on the left and the right side, and a bit bigger than this towards the right top and the left bottom side. But one strange thing is that it's coming as pure white in color, and it is obstructing the background blur view. So how should we deal with this? Okay, so for that, what we should do is we should use alpha. Let me say this as 60% by specifying 0.6 f. Alongside, this is occupying a very good space like towards left, right, bottom and top. So let's increase this padding to be around say 28 dp, so that it will leave a good amount of space towards all corner of the UI. So here it is. Well, so far we have built our background and on top of that background the white color of box with a different shape. Now the next thing is we need to create our UI element where we'll ask user to enter their username and password. So for that, let's create a column and let this column also to occupy the entire width and height of the screen. This time we'll say this to occupy the padding, that means to leave the space towards the corner by say 48 dp. Inside this column table we are going to have our three section of the UI: title, editable field, and then at the bottom we'll have button. So instead of putting everything inside this column, how about extracting this to the individual composable? And this makes testing much more easier and it also simplifies the code base. So let's create three composable. The first composable is for the login header. This is the place where we will show the titles. Let's have another composable. Let me name this as login fields. This is the place where we are going to show the field where we'll ask about the username and password. And then here we'll say about the login footer. So login footer is the place where we are going to show about the submit button and also the link so that they can head over to the sign up page. Eventually all these things will come inside this column. So we'll have login header, we'll have login field, and then we'll have login footer. Okay, so let's start creating our UI element. Well, the first thing is we are going to have a text with a message like welcome back. We want this to be of say font size as say 36 sp and font weight as extra bold. In a similar way, we'll also have one more text which says sign in to continue. We'll say this to be a font weight as font weight dot semi bold, and let's also specify the font size. Font size, we'll say this as say 18 sp. Okay, let's change this to login header. So let's check out our UI now. Well, eventually what I wanted was this welcome back to come at the center and sign in also to come towards the center. So for that, what we should do is we should provide horizontal alignment. We will say alignment dot center horizontally. Okay, so this came towards the center. Now the next thing that we want is it should have the login fields too, where we'll need two fields, one for the username and other for the password. So there are two options for us. Either we can create that inside this composable, or we can create another composable and we can reuse that so as to avoid duplicate work. Here I'm going to create the composable, and generally in your app, whenever you have this editable field, you might be having the same type of font theme applied to that. So instead of recreating this over and over, how about extracting this and keeping it at a common place so that in whichever screen you want to have the editable field, you can directly reuse that component. And that's what we are going to see here. So generally, when you have this kind of editable field, you proceed with the app name first and then write field at the end. So here, let me say this as demo field. Again, you should have a proper name here based on your app so as to identify that this field is for your app theme, where instead of recreating this right from the scratch every time for the font size, family, etc., etc., you can reuse this composable throughout your application. Inside this, now let's create outline text field. It requires two mandatory parameters, value and on value change. So we'll get this from the parameter of this composable. So we'll say this as value, and whenever value changes, we'll say on value change. It requires a string, and we can say this as on value change. Well, that's an higher order function, which means that this function is going to provide one parameter of string type. Eventually, not just this information, we'll also need to have some sort of hint. So for a hint, we have something called as label. What we can do here is that we can ask for a label parameter 2, then the placeholder parameter. So label will have text. That's the place where we'll provide label. Then comes placeholder. So if you haven't used placeholder before, then whenever this outline text field takes the focus, then label will float up and placeholder will take the place of label. So this is really a good place to provide any sort of description to the users. Say for example, if it is for username, then you may provide a description like enter your email address, so that they'll not have to remember about, okay, what should have been my username, because you are providing an exclusive hint that that's going to be your email ID. We should also take visual transformation as a parameter. Well, visual transformation.none is the default value. And why do we need this is because we do not want to reveal the password as user types the password. For everything, it's good, but for the password, we want that some sort of dot to appear. For that, we need this visual transformation. We have specified that by default it's none, so that dev need not have to pass this again and again. But for the password field, pass this value with password visual transformation. Next is key options. So we'll provide this as keyboard options dot default is the default one, but what we are going to do is we are going to provide the keyboard option where we can say capitalization, autocorrect, keyboard type, IME action, etc., etc. So the thing which is quite important for us is to provide the keyboard type. We'll say this keyboard type dot email, and IME action as Next, go. Well, if I do like this, then I make it very, very specific for email. So what should we do here? Again, straightforward, extract this out and accept this as a parameter. We'll say this as default initially, and then as defs provide some keyword option, we'll replace that with the default one. Well, so far it's all good. The next thing is we should also have some sort of icon towards the start of the editable field. So for that, we have leading icon and trailing icon. So in case if I have any leading icon, I provide that. In case of trailing icon, can provide that information too. So leading icon and trailing icon is something which is highly subjective. They may or may not be. So let's do one thing. We'll say this as leading icon @composable, and then same goes for the trailing icon too. Icon, trailing icon. But at the same time, there is really one thing that we should consider about. Leading and trailing icon may not be always available. So we should make this to accept null values too. We'll provide the default value as null. And whenever dev provides this leading or the trailing icon, it will show that icon on the UI. Okay, so we are almost done with our demo field. Let's head out to the login field. And here, let's create a state object for username. We'll say this as by remember, mutable state of empty string. In a similar way, we'll need for the password too. And we have field for the password. So what else now? For the login field, at this place we are going to have demo field, which will require all these values. In a similar way, one for the username, one for the password. So we'll need username, and then for the password, then on username changed, we'll say to pass on string. Same goes for on password change. So with this, we'll provide the value here as username. Label, we'll say this as username. Placeholder, we'll say this as enter your email address. And in case of on value change, we'll say this on username change. So in a similar way, for the password, we'll say this is password, label as password, placeholder, let's say this as enter your password, and then in case of on value change, we'll say this as on password change. So what you have seen so far is something called as state hoisting, where we are taking the state from this composable to the parent composable. So the parent composable is having the state, and rest of the other composable like this login field and the demo field, they are the stateless composable. And at all the point, wherever possible, your prime objective has to be to make the composable as stateless as possible. But there are other things also that we should take care about. So we have for the username, value, label, placeholder, on value change. How about the icon? So we had leading icon. That's a place where we can provide icon. We can say this as icons dot default dot email. Say this as email. Trailing icon we don't need here. Similarly for the password. Well, if you remember, then for password we also need a visual transformation. So not just label, placeholder, on value change, we'll need to provide visual transformation too. So we'll say this as password visual transformation, and leading icon, we'll say this as icon icons dot default dot lock. That's a place where you can say password. Let this two have a space also in between, so we'll use spacer with height say 8 dp. Okay, so we are good with our login fields too. So let's feed in the value here, username, password, and on username change. In similar way, on password change, we are going to say username equals to it, and for this we'll say password equals to it. So let's check out our UI now. Well, so here is our UI. On top we have label, then we have username and password field. So the another thing that we are missing out is an option for forgot password. So right below this, let's have text button. We'll provide text as forgot password, and in case when user taps on forgot password, let's pass on this information on forgot password click. We will provide this information at this on click. Now login field has to provide this option too, on forgot password click. So that's the place where we are going to have our logic of navigating user from this login screen to the next screen. Well, this forgot password is coming towards the center of the screen, but we don't want this to come at center, but rather this should come towards the end of the screen. That means towards the right side. So for that, on this text button, let's provide a modifier, and we'll say modifier.align alignment.end. Well, to fix this error, let's use an extension function. Let this to be on the column scope. Okay, so that's it. Okay, so here we can see that forgot password is coming towards the end of the screen. Now finally, the last thing that we should take care about is this login footer, where we need to provide two options, a button and a text below the button, where we can navigate user from the login page to the sign up screen. So first, let's have a button. We'll say this as sign in. Let this button to occupy the entire width of the screen. So for that, we'll need modifier fill max width. Alongside, we'll need a text to come below this. So we can use text button because we want to get navigated from the login page to the sign up screen. So we'll say text button as don't have an account, click here. And that's it. So we are done with our login page. But one more thing is, we should delegate this click back to the parent. So we'll say on sign in click. We'll have a higher order function here alongside for on sign up click. So that's the place where we should have a logic to navigate user from this login screen to the sign up page too. So we'll replace this as on sign in click, and this will replace this with on sign up click. Again, let's head over to the login footer. That's the place where we can write on sign in click our logic, then on sign up click, again some logic. So that's it. We have divided our screen into three segments: header, then fields at the center, and footer below this field. But this UI is still not looking that proper, because it's like everything is coming one below the other. If it maintains some sort of equal spacing towards the label, then field, and then for the bottom footer, it will look amazing. So let's try to add some sort of spaces between this segment of UI. For that, we have two options. Either we provide the spaces one after the other. For example, I can say spacer, say height as 120 dp, and follow the same thing for the login field, then the login footer if we need any space at the bottom too. But this approach is very manual. How about if we do something which can automate this for us? Because we have put all this login header, field, and footer inside column. So column does provide us an ability where we can provide spaces between the child elements. So instead of using spacer, what I'm going to do is, with the column, I'm going to use vertical arrangement, and here I'm going to say arrangement dot space around. that, now it's going to have a sort of equal spacing between the elements. But again, this is not something which is looking so amazing. We have welcome back, then sign in to continue is having a good amount of space, then username and password is having a good amount of space instead of coming together. So how should we fix this kind of UI issues? Well, if you see, then vertical arrangement has provided a sort of equal spacing among the each and every UI component, because we haven't wrapped this inside any other parent composable which can act like a holder, which can contain these individual composables. So how about placing them inside column? So far what was going on with vertical arrangement, space was applied to the text. After that, again the space was applied back to this text. But when we wrap them inside column, then instead of individual space applied to this individual text composable, now the space will get applied to this column composable. Also, as we have wrapped this inside column, so let's provide a horizontal alignment dot center horizontally, so that welcome back and then sign in to continue, they both will align toward the center of the screen too. So in a similar way, we need to wrap this inside a column 2. So we'll have our demo field, spacer, demo field. Let's put this inside a column 2. Eventually, same applies for the footer also. We'll have a column, and inside this column we are going to have our 2 UI element. So let's check out what's going on here. So an equal spacing is now applied for the login header, then field, and then footer. Earlier it was applying individually to all the individual composable. Now instead of applying individually to all the individual composable, it's applying equal space for the parent composable. That's nothing but the column. So an equal space is applied for this column, then this column, and eventually for this column. Well, as we have wrapped this inside column, so we no longer require this column scope. So we can delete that. Also for this, as we don't have an account click here to come at the center, so again let's provide a horizontal alignment as alignment dot center horizontally, and here it is. Well, we are ready with our UI element. Well, the color combination which you are seeing, that will vary as you run this on the device, because this is using material 3. So based on the device wallpaper, this sign in button background, forgot password, and this will change automatically. The final thing that we now to do is to call this login composable inside this set content. That's it. As we run this, we'll see this UI popping up on the screen. So let's run and check this out. And now we can see that this is how our login page is looking like. If I tap on the username, keyboard will pop up, and then we'll have an ability to write the email address. But if you might have observed, then this keyboard is not suitable to write email address because we haven't specified the keyboard type for this to be email type. And also, if I hit this, then it's going to the next line. How should you avoid this kind of issues? Well, for that, let's head over to the login field, and to this place, let's provide keyboard. We'll say keyboard type dot password for the password, and same goes for the email too. We'll also say about the IME action, so we'll say IME action as say go. Same, let's write it for the email too. Here we'll say this as next, and keyboard type will specify this as email. Now let's run and check this out. Okay, now let's check out our username and password field once again. So here, after tabbing on the username, keyboard pops up. Here this keyboard is suitable for writing email address too because we have @ now. So we can easily write any email address which we have. And when I tab on the next, it automatically navigates to the password field. Then whatever logic which we want to write, we can write for this action go to. But here, as I said, because we have specified password visual transformation, so we are not going to see the character which user is writing. That's it. Now, based on some validation, user may enter sign in button, validate this, check out if it is correct or not, and then navigate user to the login screen or show some sort of error here. Password is an option which is again a clickable one. So when user tabs on forgot password, you can navigate user to the screen where they can reset their password. In a similar way, this is also a button. We have specified this as text button, so user can tab on this, and as user tabs here, you can take them to the sign up page. So we can easily write any email address which we have. And when I tap on the next, it automatically navigates to the password field. Then whatever logic which we want to write, we can write for this action go to. But here, as I said, because we have specified password visual transformation, so we are not going to see the character which user is writing. That's it. Now, based on some validation, user may enter sign in button, validate this, check out if it is correct or not, and then navigate user to the login screen or show some sort of error here. Password is an option which is again a clickable one. So when user tabs on forgot password, you can navigate user to the screen where they can reset their password. In a similar way, this is also a button. We have specified this as text button, so user can tab on this, and as user tabs here, you can take them to the sign up page. Well, that's it for this video where I have talked about how you can create the login screen with Jetpack Compose, where we have the blurred image at the background, then a box on top, then on top of this we divide our UI element to 3 segments: header, center, and then footer, with equal spacing among all 3. So if you like this video, then please do not forget to hit the like button and subscribe this channel. Thank you and stay tuned.